Okay, so today we're going deep on something pretty radical. You brought up this natural law resource-based economy, or NLRBE for short.
Right?
You sent over some fascinating stuff from the Zeitgeist movement and the Venus Project folks.
Yeah.
And I guess our mission here is to like really unpack it. I mean, what does this vision actually look like? Could it actually solve some of these huge societal problems you're thinking about?
Mm.
And are there like major roadblocks? How feasible is this whole thing really? It's like rethinking how we do everything, isn't it?
Absolutely. It really is kind of a fundamental reimagining of how society could function.
Right. So maybe like for starters, just what are the core ideas here? This isn't like your typical economics 101, right?
Definitely not. We're talking about a world without money. That's the first thing to wrap your head around.
Okay, no money. So how does anything work then?
The idea is that Earth's resources are seen as the common heritage of all humanity, so they're managed globally.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just like divvying things up. It's about using science and sustainability principles to guide everything.
Okay, so science is like the big decision maker.
Exactly. Decision-making is supposed to be based on logic and what's best for the planet long term.
Not on like who's got the most cash.
Exactly. And technology plays a huge role too. Think AI automation, all that stuff to help produce and distribute goods and services.
Oh, if there's no money, what motivates people in this system?
That's a big question, right? The idea is that people would be motivated by intrinsic fulfillment,
What does that even mean?
like doing work that's meaningful to them, contributing to the well-being of others, that kind of thing.
But that seems kind of idealistic, doesn't it? I mean,
It's definitely a shift from our current system where money is the main driver.
totally. So how do these groups like Zeitgeist and Venus Project fit into all of this?
Well, Zeitgeist really pushes for this idea of human unity and using science to solve our problems.
Okay.
And the Venus Project, they actually have like blueprints for these technologically advanced sustainable cities.
Oh, wow, like actual designs.
Yeah, like super high-tech eco-cities with like renewable energy, advanced transportation systems, all that.
Sounds pretty futuristic.
It is, but that's kind of the whole point. They're envisioning a future where we've transcended our current limitations.
So let's get back to like the core differences between this NLRBE thing and what we have going on now.
Okay?
Because the stuff you sent me really highlighted some like stark contrasts. Right now resources are managed by the market, decisions are made by politicians and whoever's got the money.
Yeah.
Everyone's chasing money. Of course, hierarchies are all based on wealth, and conflict often comes from scarcity.
It's true. The current system is definitely set up in a way that often pits people against each other.
Right. So in this NLRBE world, it's like the total opposite.
It's supposed to be. Resources are managed globally and distributed based on need, not profit.
Okay.
Decisions are made through this thing called rational consensus, which we'll get into more later.
Okay.
And the goal is to eliminate hierarchies altogether so everyone is on a level playing field.
No more like billionaires and, people struggling to get by.
Right. And because resources are abundant, in theory, conflict should be reduced.
That all sounds pretty utopian, but let's talk about this rational consensus thing because, I mean, in theory, sounds great, decisions based on logic and science, not just opinions or politics.
Right.
But the stuff you sent pointed out some potential problems there too. Like everyone has biases, access to information isn't equal.
Yeah.
Emotions can cloud our judgment. It takes time to reach consensus. And what happens when people disagree about what's rational?
All very valid points. I mean, even in science, there are disagreements and interpretations.
Totally. So how do you make sure everyone's voice is heard in this system?
That's a huge challenge, and honestly, one that I don't think there's a perfect answer to.
Yeah.
But I think one important aspect would be making sure that diverse perspectives are represented in the decision-making process.
Like people from different backgrounds, different cultures.
Exactly. Not just a bunch of scientists sitting in a room making decisions for everyone.
Because what's considered rational to one group might not be to another, right?
Exactly. And I think another crucial element is ensuring that information is freely accessible to everyone.
Right, so people can actually form their own informed opinions.
And then there's the whole issue of emotions.
Yeah, I mean, we're not robots.
No, definitely not. And ignoring emotions completely isn't realistic or even desirable.
Okay.
But I think the key is to create a system that acknowledges emotions while still prioritizing logic and evidence in decision-making.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's move on to another big idea here, equitable distribution.
Right.
So everyone gets what they need. No more concept of like ownership being the most important thing.
That's a pretty radical shift.
And technology, AI, automation, all that stuff is supposed to be key to managing resources and distributing them based on actual need.
Exactly.
But this raises a ton of questions, like how do you even assess global needs accurately? How do you prevent overconsumption if everything's supposedly abundant?
Right.
And logistically, how does a moneyless global distribution system actually work? Like how does stuff get from point A to point B?
Yeah, those are all huge challenges, not like flipping a switch and suddenly everything's perfect.
No, for sure. So how do you even begin to tackle these things?
Well, I think assessing global needs would require some seriously sophisticated data analysis.
Like AI figuring out who needs what?
Exactly. And constantly updating that based on real-time information.
Okay.
To prevent overconsumption, I think education would be crucial.
Like teaching people to be responsible with resources?
Exactly. And also designing products that are durable and meant to be shared, not just consumed and discarded.
Interesting.
And then for logistics, I mean, we need completely new global supply chains and distribution networks.
Like the whole system would have to be redesigned.
Yeah, potentially with a lot more localized production and reliance on automation to make it all work.
So let's talk about hierarchy, because without money, in theory, one of the biggest drivers of hierarchy disappears.
Right.
So in this NLRBE world, it's all about collaboration, non-hierarchical structures. Technology is supposed to manage a lot of societal functions to prevent power from concentrating in the hands of a few.
Exactly.
But the stuff you sent brought up a really important point, this idea of a technological elite.
Yeah.
Like, what if the people who control the AI and the resource management systems become the new elite?
That's a very real concern, and I think that's where transparency and accountability become absolutely essential.
Okay, so how do you build those things into the system?
I mean, one idea is open source development for all the technology involved.
So everyone can see the code, how it works.
Right. And maybe having distributed control systems so no single entity has complete control.
Interesting.
And ongoing public scrutiny of the algorithms, making sure they're designed ethically and don't lead to unintended consequences.
So it's like a constant process of checks and balances.
Exactly. Because technology is a powerful tool, and we need to make sure it's used for the benefit of all, not just a select few.
Okay, so another key idea here is this belief that resource abundance and collaboration will reduce like the negative behaviors we see in society now. You know, the stuff that stems from scarcity, competition, greed, violence, all that.
Right.
And education would focus on cooperation and empathy instead of like, you know, dog-eat-dog individualism.
Yeah, the idea is to foster a more cooperative and compassionate society from the ground up.
But again, your sources bring up this idea that human motivation is complex. Like, it's not so simple to say that just because you change the environment, people will automatically change their behavior.
Right.
So could conflict still arise even in a world of abundance?
I think it's definitely possible. I mean, people can disagree about things besides material resources,
Like what?
like values, beliefs about how society should be run, what the future should look like.
Right.
So I think even in a world of abundance, there would still need to be mechanisms for resolving conflict peacefully and constructively.
So it's not a utopia where everyone's just like singing Kumbaya all the time.
No, I think it's more about creating a system that minimizes the potential for conflict and provides ways to address it when it does arise.
Okay, so one last thing. This NLRBE is presented as a solution to what's called structural violence.
Yes.
Which basically means the harm that's caused by unequal systems that prevent people from meeting their basic needs.
Exactly.
And a lot of the blame is placed on the current monetary system for creating these disparities that lead to so much suffering. So the NLRBE aims to remove those barriers and ensure everyone has access to what they need to live a good life.
Right. The idea is to dismantle those systems of inequality and replace them with something that prioritizes human well-being above all else.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. This NLRBE is a pretty radical vision with some, you know, potentially powerful solutions to the problems they're thinking about.
Yeah.
The focus on logic, shared resources technology, it's all very compelling.
It is.
But as we've discussed, there are some major practical questions that need to be addressed.
Absolutely.
Like, how do you actually make rational consensus work? How do you ensure equitable distribution in a complex global system?
Right.
And how do you prevent new forms of inequality from arising?
These are all questions that proponents of this system would need to grapple with.
Yeah. And like you said earlier, there might not be perfect answers to all of them.
But I think the fact that people are even asking these questions and trying to envision a better future is a sign of hope.
I agree. So this whole deep dive, I think it raises a fundamental question. Can we as a society really overcome like those deeply ingrained aspects of human behavior that cause so many problems just by changing the environment around us?
Yeah, it's like nature versus nurture on a societal scale.
Exactly. And that's a really complex issue with no easy answers.
Definitely.
But I think it's something worth thinking about as we consider the kind of future we want to create.
Absolutely.
So hopefully this has given you a solid understanding of the core ideas behind the NLRBE. And maybe it sparks some new questions for you to explore. Maybe you want to look into the history of utopian thought or delve deeper into the challenges of global governance in a technological age.
Yeah, there's a lot more to unpack here.
Definitely a lot more to unpack.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for joining me for this deep dive.
Of course. It's been a fascinating conversation.
It has. Until next time.
See ya.